Inhofe, I'd like to turn to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I appreciate this hearing is probably more than anybody else does, since I chaired this committee during the last administration, and I have been listening very carefully. And I have to tell you, as I said in a comment earlier, that this issue was not just one issue to our farmers and ranchers in Oklahoma. It was the issue. It's number one. And I know that, Mr. Fortson, you are with the American Farm Bureau, so I'm sure you hear this from a lot of the others that are out there. Real quickly, Mr. Forstrom, the rule that is clarifying right now, the rule that we have, the Obama-era WOTUS rule, is not currently in effect in your state of Wyoming, but it is in my state of Oklahoma. Now, you broadly in your opening statement talked about some of the costs, but would you specifically talk about some of the costs associated with your situation as opposed to our situation, or what are going to have to be subjected to that you now are not, because you're not under this regulation? What are some of the things that states would suffer from under the previous administration's record? The costs.
The cost to the producer, the cost of permitting, the cost of the consultants can be in the thousands, if not into the hundreds of thousands. That's not an excuse to have dirty water, and we as farmers don't want dirty water. We're happy to do it, but if the cost out is more than what we'll get out of it, it's a business decision, and they'll quit doing it if that's what it comes down to.
Yeah. Well, you know, there's this assumption that people who own the property are not going to be the best stewards of the property. We had an interesting experience with one of the people from the previous administration coming out. In fact, I made this a requirement before his confirmation to come out to Oklahoma on the partnership program. And you're both familiar with that partnership program. And they came back with glowing reports that, yes, in fact, those property owners in my state of Oklahoma, and I suspect all around the country, are very much the most concerned people about their own properties. That's not just unique to Oklahoma. Now, there's this assumption that you liberals generally have, is that states are really not competent to get these things done, and that they have to rely on the wisdom of the federal government to get it done. I'd like to ask you, Commissioner Goring, some of the things that the states are doing right now that we may not be aware of that are actually being done, in your opinion, better than the federal government.
Senator Inhofe, it's interesting that you'd ask that, because I'm confused about all this discussion about the whole definition and reworking everything, revamping, trying to take control of large tracts of land where there are no rivers or no streams, and only ditches and other problems, isolated water features. States have a responsibility under the Clean Water Act. They have primacy. They have a cooperators agreement with EPA. They have to maintain and respect the law of the land, which is the Clean Water Act. So to disregard it or say that states can't be any more strict because their legislators won't allow it, it's irrelevant. You still have to maintain the law of the land. You still have to regulate. You still have to implement. And if the federal government has control of it, it doesn't mean that it's going to be any better regulated. In fact, you might be missing unique opportunities in which you're going to be addressing the unique situation of the watershed itself. And that's where the state has the intimate knowledge to go in and do the testing, to mitigate issues, to have control without requiring a farmer or a rancher to go get a permit, to pay for a permit, to pay for a consultant, to make sure that they're not doing something because it's perceived that way. Mm-hmm. The reality is the state is still there monitoring, regulating, and they understand the resource better.
Well, that's an excellent statement, and let's stop and look at what's happened since 1972. We have been very successful in the system that we have used, and giving the states those the powers of that regulation. Excellent response. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.